Welcome to another episode of I Speak African. I'm your host Yanu. In today's episode, we're going to discuss weddings. Now, weddings are very important in an African culture, whether the people are from the States, Europe, or the continent. We all, when we conduct our weddings, they're very important to us. Now, growing up in America, I know that I've been to Black American weddings, and they're not as I wouldn't say they're yeah, I would say they're not as, you know, flamboyant or extravagant as African weddings, but they are, you know, pretty extravagant depending on who they are. But I noticed that, in Black American weddings, we take a lot of for example, the idea of jumping the brim, that's taken from our ancestors, um, and as all Black weddings, you can't be a. I mean, I guess the wedding's not official, or it's not a Black wedding if there's not the Cupid shuffle or the cha cha slide uh, during after the ceremony takes place. But I remember my first African wedding I went to. It was an Eritrean wedding. Now my friend, she was getting married, and my friend from college, so she was getting married, and I've never been to a Habesha wedding before. And when I went there, I took the train. So I'm taking the train to DC, and when I get to the stop that's in DC, before the venue, I see this Oyibo guy you know, that that I went to college with, and he sees me. He's like, "Oh, you look nice." I'm like, "Thank you." And then he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to a wedding," and I'm wearing all white. And he's like, "Oh, is it an African wedding?" I'm just looking at him like, that's it's very stereotypical just to assume that it's not, even though it was an African wedding, just to assume that it's an African wedding. So despite his foolishness, the wedding was very nice. And this is, unlike other cultures' weddings, you can't wear white. Only the bride wears white. But in Habesha weddings, whether it's Ethiopia or Eritreans, you can wear white. And when I went there, it was very nice. I was playing the drums. I was doing a skitsa, their dance with the Ethiopian and Eritrean dance with the shoulders. So yeah, I was doing that dance. It was a really nice wedding, and I really enjoyed my time. And if if people have, Habesha friends, I strongly recommend that you go to their weddings. Their weddings are actually very nice, and they're very different than West African weddings, or Central African weddings, or South African weddings. But as a Nigerian and a West African, like I said, I can tell you that their weddings are much different than ours, much different. And uh, this topic of weddings also brings me back to uh, episode 8, which was about culture, African culture. You know, African culture is something that is learned through practice. If we practice, you have to practice culture in order to understand it and to get it, to get it down. Now, yet when Africans love to talk about culture, yet when we don't want to, mix or intermarry with other African cultures, then we use culture as an excuse. And I often hear this used by Ethiopians, Eritreans, and Igbos, like Nigerian Igbos, because those three groups, I'm not saying it's just those three groups, but I notice this a lot. Those three groups don't want to marry outside of their ethnicity or even their country. Like, so, quick history lesson about Eritrea. Eritrea's population, I believe it's for every 5 women, there is one guy. So that's why when you do meet a lot of Eritrean women, they will not talk to non-Eritrean guys because they're often told that they have to like repopulate their, their country, their population, because a lot of the Eritrean men died during the war against Ethiopia. So now you have a whole bunch of women and a small amount of men. So whenever you see Eritrean women, they're most likely going to marry Eritrean men, or they might marry an Ethiopian. But um, yeah, but Ethiopian always they usually always use that excuse. Like I said, Ethiopians, Eritreans, and Igbos use that excuse of not marrying other, like a lot of Igbos won't marry Yorubas, or they won't marry Edo people or people from Cross River or whatever or Delta, you know, or Middle Belt people, and they'll make excuses like, "Oh no, the culture." I'm thinking you can learn culture. Culture is passed on, like culture is something that is learned, you know, and I'm not. It's not like I'm not picking on these three cultures. This is something I've seen over and over throughout the years because other Africans do it too. I've seen it before. Like I remember when I was in college, my friend he's Cameroonian, and I remember he told me like without any kind of shame or embarrassment, he was like, "My mother said I can marry anyone else in this world, but I cannot marry a woman from the Bamileke tribe. If she's Bamileke, I cannot marry her." And he didn't even feel bad about that. And I think that's a shame because we as Africans always promote anti-blackness and Afrophobia, and then when we marry somebody else, you know, Oyibo people whose culture is so drastically different than ours, we don't have any excuses. It's I found love and I can't help myself, you know. And another occasion was when I was speaking to a former colleague of mine. She's an older Ethiopian woman, and we were discussing the subject of marriage. And I was like, "Would you let your daughter marry another Ethiopian from another African country?" And she was making all these excuses and stuttering, and talking about culture. They always bring up culture about how I'm thinking like anyone can make injera, anyone can do a shoulder dance, anyone can go to church or go to the mosque. Like that's something you learned. But then when I brought up like I was like, hey, what about an Oyibo person? She was like, oh, well, yeah, that's fine as long as they love each other. It's okay. I don't want to get in the way of that. I'm thinking, oh, your tune has changed. You know, and the only time I see Afrophobic, you know, I see Afrophobic Africans marrying Africans of another nationality or or ethnicity or tribe is when that specific individual has a very lucrative job. Like if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or CPA, then the parents would be like, okay, it's fine because the parents aren't looking at the individual anymore. They're looking at what the individual can provide, which is they can bring not only my daughter a lot of money, but they can bring our household a lot of money. So that's when it changed. You know, and it's very sad and unfortunate because we're so similar. We share a continent. We live on the same continent. If you go back to our history, we were trading. We were trading. From east to west to south to north before colonization. We were trading, and not only were we trading, we were intermarrying. You know, that's why you have a lot of tribes who look like other tribes from different parts of the continent because we were marrying each other, you know. And another thing is, I often hear African women complaining about their men from their tribe. Like you hear a Yoruba woman will say, "I don't want a Yoruba man; he's a Yoruba demon," and then you'll hear, various Kenyan women from different tribes of Kenya, and they'll say like, "Oh, I don't want a Kikuyu man; I don't want a Jaluo man." And then I often hear South African women just complain about their men altogether, but it's mostly like Zulu women, Xhosa women will be like, "No, I don't want a Zulu man. I don't want an Xhosa man. Like they're not good." And to that, I say like, don't marry people from your tribe. I'm a strong believer in cultural diversity. Don't marry somebody that's from your tribe. If you see that the men of your tribe or the women of your tribe are not good, marry somebody from another tribe. Marry somebody from another country, like African country. You can make it work. It's that easy. You can make it work because if y'all can make it work with you know, the Asians, the Hispanics, the whites, y'all can make it work with other Africans. It's very possible. Not only is it possible, it's very easy. Our cultures are very similar, very very similar. That's why when you know if you think back to people you hung out when you were in college or after college, like if they were from another African country, they can tell you, "Oh, yeah, my parents did this," and you'd be like, "Oh, yeah, my parents did this too." You know why? Because we all come from the same continent, and our cultures, you know, although they are not identical, they do have a lot of similarities. You know, and in order to solve this prevailing issue, I strongly believe that, like I said, we should marry people from other tribes. I went to college with a Yoruba girl. She's married to a Ghanaian guy, and they're happy. They have a healthy marriage. You know, I also have a friend. She's from Cameroon. He's from Guinea. She's a Catholic. He's a Muslim. They made it work. They love each other. Now I think they have two children. I have another friend. He is, You know, he's Igbo Nigerian. She is from Ivory Coast. They have, I think they have 4 kids now, and not only that, because French is spoken throughout or widely, yeah, throughout Ivory Coast. He's learning French for her to strengthen their relationship. And that's what we all need to do as African people. To strengthen our relationship, you need to learn the person. If you're married to somebody of another African tribe or another African nationality, you need to learn their language. That's foremost the most important thing, to learn their language, because then you're connecting to them on a deeper level. Now you don't have to be asking, oh, would you say, translate this for me, translate this to me. And then when you go see their parents, now their parents are happy because it's like, okay, my in-law, is showing respect to us by learning our languages, or our language. It's very simple. Um, but yeah, we as Africans need to start seeing each other's cultures as beneficial and not detrimental. And I see that all the time because, listen, when we come here, those who are not born here, when Africans come here, they sure learn American culture very quick. They learn the language, not the language, but the vernacular, the nuances of American culture, and that's because they see it as beneficial. Well, we need to start seeing African cultures as beneficial, because the more we work together, the more we will benefit as a whole. And that's something I've been preaching since I was like in college. But you know, many times Africans are very stubborn. A lot of times we're set in our ways, and we're like, no, I don't want to learn somebody else's culture. Why should I have to learn somebody else's culture? Just like the idea that, like, in East Africa, there's a lot of you have Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Uganda is implementing Swahili, and I think that's a very good idea. I think more African countries should implement a regional language. It makes a lot of sense. Um, and also, parts of Congo speak Swahili as well. Um, just like in West Africa, I think there should be a regional language, not a colonized language, not French or English, but a regional African language that we can all get behind. So that was we can trade would be much easier too, and it will strengthen the whole entire continent's economy. But yeah, thank you for listening to another episode of I Speak African. Please support my channel by liking and subscribing to it. These episodes can also be downloaded on Spotify, and you guys can reach me for comments or questions at ispeakafrican12 at gmail.com. Thank you and have a blessed day.